Okay, so now we are going to do the part of a sensory perception lab, which is a part of our neurological disorders curriculum. So we're going to play a little game. Allison, what I want you to do is, as fast as you can, I'm going to time you, tell me the color of the font of all of these words. You ready? Go.
Red, blue, yellow, black, green, blue, orange, pink, brown.
Great. 5.6 seconds. Pretty fast. All right. Now let's try it again on a different set of words. All right. So tell me the color of the font. Ready? Go.
Brown, red, orange, yellow, green, blue, red, pink, orange.
10 seconds. That was terrible. Why did it take you so long? What's going on?
So in looking at this, I automatically wanted to read the words that were there, and I had to consciously tell myself to actually read aloud the color, not the word.
Right. This is a phenomenon called the stroop effect, and it's actually a really good demonstration of how the brain processes different sensory information. So here's a picture of the human brain as it appears in our high school curriculum lesson 1.4. And different parts of the brain control different processes. They sense different sensations. So for example, when you're looking at those words and you're seeing the color of the text, that information is being sent from your eyes to a part of your brain called the occipital lobe. Then when you are reading the word and recognizing all those little squiggles as a word that is in English, which is a language you speak, your temporal lobe becomes involved. That is the part of your brain that is responsible for understanding language. And so an interesting thing about the human brain is that it's very sensitive to language. It kind of always wants to default to whatever, if something is written or spoken in a language that you understand. However, you know that you're supposed to not read the word, but just tell me the color of the font. So what happens is when the color of the font is a different color than what the word is saying, there's a conflict going on between what your occipital lobe is processing and what your temporal lobe is processing. And so what happens is that another part of your brain has to step in to resolve this discrepancy. And in this case, this is the frontal lobe. The frontal lobe is kind of the thinking part of your brain, and it is going to override your temporal lobe's desire for you to say the word instead of the color. And so eventually it will get you to the right answer, but just adding this extra step just adds time, and so become much slower at it. All right, so in fairness, let's have Peter have a go at this too. Okay, so Peter, as fast as you can, tell me the color of these words. Go.
Okay. Red, blue, yellow, black, green, blue, orange, pink, and brown.
All right, not bad. About 5 seconds, same as Allison. Let's try the next one. All right, go.
Okay. Red, another kind of red, yellow, green.
Wait. Peter, let me stop you there. You got those wrong. What's going on?
Oh, I'm colorblind. So even when I try to focus in on these, the colors and not the words, it's a lot harder for me to differentiate some of these reds and greens and browns and some of the oranges as well.
Okay, this makes sense. So what you're probably seeing is something that looks a lot like this. Does that look different to you, Peter?
Not dramatically, no.
No. All right. So Peter has a type of color blindness, and that is caused normally when you see light enters your eye and it goes to a little piece of tissue in the back of your eye called the retina. And the retina contains a bunch of these different highly specialized proteins called cones. They detect different wavelengths of light. And so most humans have 3 different cones. So that gives us full color vision. What's going on in Peter is that he has a genetic mutation that has actually interfered with this process. So he simply lacks one of these cones, and that makes it really difficult for him to be able to tell the difference between green and red. So that's kind of why Peter was not doing such a good job here. Sorry, Peter. Now you've got a fun anecdote about this, right?
Right. So during the Cold War, they actually used the stroop effect to try to identify Russian spies. So if you look at the text at the bottom, it's probably really easy for you to read through those colors. Probably like red, green, blue, blue, red, purple. But if you speak Russian or you can read Russian, you're going to have that same kind of delay, that conflict processing. And so during the Cold War, you could detect spies, or you could at least detect people who were capable of reading Russian by using this effect, because they were a lot slower than somebody who could only read English.
So Peter, you might have been accidentally detected as a Russian spy.
I might have.
Well, it's a good thing that you never were. All right, so probably you don't have any Russian spies in your high school classroom, I hope. But it's very likely that you do have somebody with color blindness. It is very, very common. So let's take a look at some things you can do to make your lessons more accessible to students with color blindness. So this little teaching tidbit is from our high school from our online course for high school teachers called Introduction to the Nervous System. And here, very commonly, people will make a graph or a presentation or some kind of visual aid, and they'll use color to distinguish between two different things. But when you make the colors red and green, it presents a problem for people with color blindness. So Peter, can you tell the difference between the experimental group and the control group here?
I kind of can. If you're 10 years in science and everybody uses red and greens, you kind of get coping mechanisms, but it's difficult. There's a lot more cognitive load going into looking at these graphs.
Yeah, so this is probably more or less what Peter is seeing when he's looking at this graph. And it's pretty hard to tell the difference between those lines. So there's a few simple things that you can do to make this easier for your students with color blindness. One is you can use colorblind friendly colors. Red and green are really difficult for most people with color blindness, but magenta and green are actually not too bad. The magenta with someone for color blindness kind of turns into this nice periwinkle color, and they can still distinguish between the two. Another option might be to use something other than color to distinguish it. So here we're still using the red and green, but we're also distinguishing this experimental group on the graph with a dotted line. And so these are also really easy to tell apart. So those are just a few tips. Our online courses are full of other teaching tidbits like this that link science to classroom practice. And thanks for listening.